Welcome to Explorer's Guide Maritime Academy's helpful videos. We're going through the application process, and my name is Gary Coolibert. I am one of the head instructors with Explorer's Guide. Sea service, one of the very important parts of any application going in. Sea service determines everything when it comes to your license. The ability to even get a license depends upon how many days you've had out on the water. It determines which route you get. What that means is if all your time is on inland, you're going to get an inland license. If it's out on the Great Lakes, it's inland Great Lakes. If it's out on the coastal areas, you're coastal. If it's out in the ocean, ocean. So where you spend your time on the water determines what kind of license you will get. For your masters, it also determines your approved tonnage. An OUPV is good for 100 tons, but the master goes in increments of 25, 50, 100, 200. Time on boats of certain sizes will get you that approval, that endorsement. And again, one of the biggest problems is most people don't do a good job of tracking their sea service. It's important to do it now, especially if as you sell boats or you go out with other people. Again, it's important to keep this in mind, especially also once you have your license, you got to continue to track it for your renewals. Sea service must be verified in several different ways. The common way is CG 719S, which is a form that we put on our sea service time, which we're going to go through. Other forms are letters from the employers, the military. Must have a minimum required time on a vessel and on a route. One form per boat. So if you're going to use 3 boats to get your sea service time, you're going to have 3 forms. Boat has to be motorized or sail auxiliary, which means it's sail with a motor. Drift boats, kayaks, they're not going to count that time towards license. The personal watercraft, to some degree, they might. Underway time is what counts, not the time you're tied up at the dock, the time you're out on the water. Now, what's a day? We don't count hours, we count days. A day is between 4 and 12 hours. So again, if you're on a 12-hour shift, you sometimes can get a day and a half out of that. But again, that's a different issue we'll talk about another time. So you have to have a minimum of 4 hours on an average. And normally, again, a day is all you get per calendar day. Now, for your OUPV, your uninspected passenger vessel, you have to have 360 days of documented sea service, with 90 of that 360 in the last 3 years. 360 doesn't have to be in the last 3 years. That goes back to age 16. But you have to have 90 days in the last 3 years. For a Great Lake endorsement, same thing, 360 days, 90 in the last 3 years. In the 360, you have to have a minimum of 90 on the Great Lakes to get that endorsement. For near coastal, it's exactly the same, except there we have to have 90 days on either the Great Lakes or the near coastal. Great Lakes time about 4 years ago was changed over to include near coastal. So if you got Great Lakes time, you're going to get a new near coastal endorsement, which is really what you want. Okay. So again, there's only one credential, the OUPV, as far as our 6-pack, our guide licenses that we do, but it's one of 3 routes. Depending upon time you spent, it goes, again, inland first, Great Lakes, which includes inland, and then near coastal, which includes everything in the United States out to 100 miles into the ocean. Here's our form, and we're back to the same thing we've always talked about, making sure that your name is consistent, that it's your official name, not your nickname or abbreviation. Social Security number is required for tracking on original. Then we're going to get down to the boat information. The name of the boat, if it has a name, otherwise just put down NA. Registration number or the VIN number or the documentation number, however you're going to show proof that you own that vessel. And then we're going to get down to, again, the detail of the boat, gross tons. If it's 20, 25 feet, normally it's 1 gross tons. As we get into larger boats, documented boats, whatever the tonnage is what you want to put down on those papers. The outboard propulsion, outdoor motor, inboard motor, sail auxiliary, however, electric motor. Again, the type of propulsion, be as reasonably specific as you can. And then your role, this is again where people really mess up. You're not a deckhand. Deckhand time does not count. You're the master, the operator, or a mate on that boat. The location of where you use the boat is extremely important because that goes back to your approved route. Lake Michigan, we get into the bays, Saginaw Bay, Green Bay, any of those. I strongly suggest if you're on one of the bays that you put down the particular lake you're on, be it Lake Huron, Lake Ontario, Lake Superior, whatever it may be, because reviewers sometimes mess up on it. And do not use colloquials. We have one up here that's very typical, and people have been denied licenses because of it. There is no Bay of Green Bay. There is Green Bay, and there's a city of Green Bay. But if you put down the Bay of Green Bay, they'll deny the sea service because it does not show up in any official documents. So again, the body of water is very important. You're on. If you're on a lot of small inland lakes, you can basically say inland lakes of Wisconsin or the Western Rivers, whatever it may be. You don't have to list every one of them. Days, as you see here, for each month, we have a year and we have the days. So you're going to go back to the best of your recollection, based on your logs, your memory, everything else, for each of the years, starting with the last time you've used the boat backwards, for that year, that month, how many days were you on the water? Again, remember, it's a minimum of 4 hours per day. You can only collect 1 day for each calendar days, as we talked about earlier. So on this form, we have a total of 65 days that we were underway on this boat. On average, 4 hours, 5 hours, cannot be less than 4 hours. Here we have an average of 5. And our distance from shore was on an average about 4 miles. The distance from shore only really comes in where it's really important is when you're talking about near coastal and ocean time. But where did we spend that time? We're going to take that 65 days and we're going to divide it into 3 categories. Number of days on the Great Lakes. In this case, we had 20. A number of days shoreward of the demarcation line. Talk about the demarcation line here in a moment. When I'm talking about shoreward, again, we're talking about inland lakes. We already got the Great Lakes, so we're not talking about them. We're talking about your inland lakes, such as the Winnebago systems and the like. Could be Puget Sounds, could be San Francisco Bay, Long Island. All those are inland waters. And then finally, we have the areas that are seaward of the boundary lines. And these are out on the coastal areas. Again, in fact, the next slide will show you how that's defined. It's all defined in 46 CFR Part 7. So your total days here cannot exceed the 65 we're claiming on the form. So 65 is our base, and then we go from there. So, if it's Great Lakes, you don't count the Great Lakes as inland time. It's either or. You can't double dip. I've had guys put down 120 days total and then put down 120 for inland and 120 for Great Lakes. It doesn't work that way. It's got to equal, what's on the right, it's got to equal the total that you put above here. Here's an example of beyond, in and outside of the boundary line. So basically they're saying anything on the St. Johns River in Florida out to the first buoy is inland waters. But once we get beyond that and beyond the lines that I've drawn there, that is your coastal waters. So they have these on all the coasts that we have. The Gulf of Mexico, basically, they said the entire Gulf out to 12 miles is inland waters. Now, on the next page, you're going to sign and said, yep, this information I have here is true. If you own the boat, you're going to have to show proof of ownership. And that can come in the form of a copy of your boat title, your registration, if the boat's documented, documentation, proof of insurance. If you use proof of insurance, then what you're going to do, or the bill of sale, most likely you're going to use a VIN number. So whatever you put on for that identification, it's the document that says that you own the boat has to be the same. If you're signed as an owner of a corporation, then you have to show proof that you are owner of the corporation, or have somebody else within the corporation also sign off on that as a co-signer. This sometimes people got their boats in their LLCs, and then they have to submit papers showing that they're part of the LLC. If you do not own the boat and you're out with a friend of yours, an employer, or whatever, then they can sign, and you have no need for proof of ownership. You sign it, they sign it. Now, starting in 2014, they threw in this little provision that sea service for people less than the age of 16 will not be counted except where there's compelling circumstances and unique experience acquired before 16. And what they mean by that, in fact, it's not defined, but what we ran into when we worked with this is things like boater safety courses. If they were in fact working as a mate on one of the boats, were they part of the drug consortium? Proof of being part of the drug consortium, letters from the captains. If they were part of a sailing group and took sailing classes, they took boating classes, anything to show that prior to 16, they had experiences on the water that weren't being counted. They don't want to have people that were just out there fishing, hook baiters, as they call them. They want people that actually had something to do with the safety of the vessel. If you can document that, time before the age 16 counts. Now, up here where we have hard water half the year, it's hard to get 360 days between 16 and 18. 18 is when you can get your license. So what they have to do is go back before 16, and these are the things that they need to do. Okay, masters, this is inspected vessels. The sea service is the same for the OUPV on inland and on Great Lakes for the OUPV for the masters. Near coastal, everything doubles. So now we got 720 days, not 360, 90 in the last 3 years, and now I need 360 days, either on the Great Lakes and or near coastal, to get sea service for my masters on ocean, which is, or near coastal, which is what I want. Okay, tonnage only relates to the masters. And again, 25, 50, 100 tons. You have to have 90 days in those categories to get that license. Everybody gets a 25 ton, but you have to have time on a boat that's 25 or 17 tons to get a 50 ton, and 34 tons or 51 tons to get 100 ton. So in essence, they're saying you got to put some time on big boats if you want a master's for the bigger boats on it. Now, what about the letter from your employer? You don't always have to fill out sea service forms. If you have an employer and you're working on their boats, their letterhead dated, signed by somebody officially within the company, attesting that, you can put down accumulation of the employee sea service time, like the form I have in front of you. And the form is available out on the internet on the NMC site. And basically information on the boat and the number of days you serve. So some people that work up in Alaska a lot of times are out on the either coast commercially, what they will have versus having a sea service form. Again, they go on under days underway in the last 3 years, underway in the last 5, how many hours, etc. This is the type of information that's got to be on that letter. For the military, a transcript of sea service forms is called a TOS, is what they're looking for, or the history of assignments, or any other tracking system On the small boats, they usually have hours out there. You take the hours that they used on the small boat from the software, divide by 4, put that on a sea service form, have a officer or the commander sign off on the form, and it will count that. Again, information on the boat is what they want. The name or the official numbers, period that you were assigned, type of boat, position held. A lot of times I tell people, hang on to your orders because that's going to tell you what your job was. They want people that had anything to do on deck. If you have engineering time, they'll give you 90 days, but most of it, to really count, has to be as a deck involved in one way or another on, ideally, on lookout watch. Okay, the DD 214 form they will not accept because it does not have this information on it. Again, CHIPS, unit generated letters. You're working at a Coast Guard station. They will take a letter only for the current assignments on it. If it's 4 or 5 units back, they won't accept the letter. Then it's got to be the TOS form that they're following. And again, sea service may be accredited for up to 70 hours. Oh, excuse me, prior to 1970. So basically, if you assign a boat for 100 days, 70% of that is what they would take. After 2016, it's going to be 60%. So if you're out there for 2 years, you take the total number of days times 0.6, and that's how many days they'll credit you towards it on it. Again, mariners would serve with uniform service vessels. Recently, they're saying basically that 90 days instead of being the last 3 years will be 90 days in the last 7 years. And this is, again, a law change that happened just a couple of years ago on that. Time on underway printout, divide by 4, as I mentioned earlier, and then put that on a small vessel sea service form, and then get it signed by one of the commanding officers there. I hope this helps you. Again, sea service is extremely important. It dictates a lot of things. I talked to a lot of people that work on boats, and I mentioned sea service, and they haven't got a clue. Making sure if you're the captain of the vessel or the, involved in your company, that you make sure all your people, especially the new people coming up, are documenting the sea service, because it's going to have a major impact on their getting a license and again their career and their ability to help you as well. Hope you found this helpful. Appreciate it, and we hope you had a good chance to look at the rest of the videos as well. Take care.